He sat on the same bench every morning, 7:30 sharp, in front of First National Bank of Springfield. Torn jacket, weathered boots, a cardboard sign that simply read, "Veteran, anything helps." Most people walked past without a glance. Some dropped loose change. A few offered coffee or sandwich, but nobody really saw him. His name was Michael Torres, though the bank employees just called him the homeless guy. What they didn't know was that Staff Sergeant Michael Torres had spent 12 years in Army Special Forces, with 3 tours in Afghanistan and 2 classified missions he'd never talk about. The security cameras captured everything. But what they recorded wasn't just a bank robbery being stopped. It was the moment an entire city discovered they'd been ignoring a war hero for months. Welcome to Story with Jorge. Before we continue this incredible story of hidden courage and forgotten heroes, tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from today? And if you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button. These stories matter. It was a Tuesday morning in November when everything changed. The bank was busy. Payday for the local factory, pension checks being cashed, the usual crowd of working families trying to make ends meet. Michael sat on his bench outside, same as always, watching the flow of people with eyes that noticed more than most. At 10:47 a.m., a black sedan pulled up to the curb. 2 men got out, both wearing hoodies pulled low, both moving with the kind of nervous energy that made Michael's instincts kick in immediately. He'd seen that walk before, men about to do something they couldn't take back. The first man, tall and thin with twitchy hands, kept checking his phone. The second, shorter but broader, had his right hand stuffed deep in his jacket pocket. Michael watched them through the bank's glass doors as they entered, and something in his gut told him this wasn't going to end well. Inside the bank, Sarah Mitchell was having the worst day of her career. The new teller system had crashed twice, customers were getting impatient, and her manager kept breathing down her neck about processing times. She was so focused on her screen that she almost missed the 2 men approaching her window. "We need to make a withdrawal," the tall one said, his voice too quiet for the busy lobby. Sarah looked up with her practiced smile. "Of course. Do you have your account number and ID ready?" That's when she saw the shorter man's hand come out of his jacket. The metal gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and Sarah's smile died on her lips. "All of it," the man with the gun whispered. "Everything in your drawer. Now." Outside on his bench, Michael noticed the change immediately. The normal flow of people in and out of the bank had stopped. Through the windows, he could see customers frozen in place, a young mother pulling her child closer, an elderly man slowly raising his hands. Most people would have called 911. Most people would have stayed put, kept their heads down, waited for the professionals. But Michael Torres wasn't most people. He stood up slowly, his joints protesting after hours on the hard bench. His mind was already calculating. 2 suspects, unknown if there were more, civilians in immediate danger, response time for local police at least 8 minutes in this part of town. 8 minutes was too long. Sarah's hands were shaking as she opened her cash drawer. The tall robber kept looking over his shoulder, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool November air. The shorter one with the gun seemed calmer, more in control, which made him more dangerous. "Hurry up," the tall one hissed. "This is taking too long." Behind them, a security guard named Pete Wilson was slowly reaching for his radio. Pete was 62, 3 years from retirement. With grandkids he coached in Little League. He'd never drawn his weapon on duty, never fired a shot in anger. His hands were trembling as he tried to key the radio without being noticed. The gunman's head snapped around. "Drop it, old man! Hands where I can see them!" Pete froze, the radio halfway to his mouth. That's when the bank's front door opened with a soft chime. Michael Torres walked in like he had every right to be there. No hurry, no panic, just a tired-looking homeless man stepping out of the cold. The robbers barely glanced at him, just another civilian, another problem to manage. But Sarah saw something different, the way he moved, the way his eyes swept the room in one quick professional scan. This wasn't the shuffle of a broken man. This was something else entirely. "Sir, you need to leave," the tall robber said, his voice cracking slightly. "Bank's closed." Michael looked at him with calm, steady eyes. "Doesn't look closed to me." The gunman swung his weapon toward Michael. "I said, get out, old man. This isn't your problem." Michael's response was so quiet that only the people closest to him heard it. Actually, it is. What happened next took less than 6 seconds, but those 6 seconds would be replayed on news channels across the country for weeks. Michael moved like water, fluid, unstoppable, precise. His left hand caught the gunman's wrist, twisting it at an angle that made the weapon useless, while his right delivered a controlled strike to the man's solar plexus. The gun clattered to the floor as the robber doubled over, gasping for air. The tall one spun around, fumbling for something in his jacket, but Michael was already there. A single pressure point strike to the neck, and the second robber crumpled like a marionette with cut strings. Both men were on the ground, conscious but completely subdued, before most of the customers even realized what had happened. The bank fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the soft whimpering of the young mother's child. Michael stood over the two would-be robbers, his breathing barely elevated, his expression unchanged. Pete, the security guard, finally found his voice. How did you... Michael picked up the dropped weapon, expertly cleared it, and handed it to Pete Grip first. 12 years Army Special Forces, some things you don't forget. That's when Sarah noticed the tattoo on Michael's wrist as he rolled up his sleeve. A faded Army Special Forces insignia, earned in places most people couldn't pronounce, doing things most people couldn't imagine. The police arrived 4 minutes later to find the situation completely under control. The robbers were zip-tied with plastic cuffs Michael had asked to borrow from Pete's duty belt, both sitting quietly against the wall like scolded children. Detective Ray Morrison was the first officer through the door. He'd worked bank robberies for 15 years, and he'd never seen anything like this. 2 armed suspects taken down by an unarmed homeless man with military precision and 0 casualties. "Sir," Morrison said to Michael, "I'm going to need a full statement." Michael nodded. "Staff Sergeant Michael Torres, retired, Special Forces, serial number 123-4, 5-6789. The detective's eyebrows shot up. "Special Forces? 12th Group, Afghanistan, 2008 to 2020. Medically retired after an IED incident near Kandahar." As the story came out in pieces over the next hour, the full picture emerged. Michael had been living on the streets for 8 months, not from addiction or mental illness, but from a perfect storm of circumstances that could happen to anyone. His wife had died of cancer 2 years earlier. The medical bills, even with insurance, had consumed their savings. His PTSD had made holding a regular job difficult. The VA housing assistance had a 6-month waiting list. So he'd made the decision that thousands of veterans make every year. He'd survive on the streets until something better came along. But Michael Torres had done more than just survive. For 8 months, he'd been the unofficial guardian of that corner. Store owners would later tell police that petty crime had dropped to almost 0 since the homeless guy had taken up residence on the bench. A purse snatcher had mysteriously changed his mind after Michael had quietly followed him for 2 blocks. A group of teenagers planning to vandalize the bank's ATM had suddenly decided they had better things to do after Michael had simply made eye contact with them. He'd been protecting that community for months, and nobody had noticed. The bank's security footage told the real story. Camera after camera showed Michael's daily routine, not the random wandering of a broken man, but the methodical patrol of someone who took responsibility seriously. Sarah Mitchell was the first to speak up. "He's been out there every day," she told Detective Morrison, "rain or shine. I always wondered why I felt safer when he was there." By evening, the story had spread beyond Springfield. Local news picked it up first, then regional outlets, then the national media. Homeless veteran stops bank robbery became the headline that reminded America of something it had forgotten. But Michael didn't stick around for the interviews. By the time the cameras arrived, he was gone, his bench empty except for a handwritten note weighing down by a small stone. "Thank you for the coffee and sandwiches. Some missions end quietly." M.T. The bank president, a man named Robert Hayes, spent the rest of that week trying to track Michael down. When he finally found him at the VA shelter across town, he came with an offer. "We need a security consultant," Hayes said. "Someone who understands risk assessment, threat evaluation, protective services. The pay is $65,000 a year, full benefits, and housing assistance if you need it." Michael looked at him with those same calm, steady eyes. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Hayes, but I'm not looking for charity." "This isn't charity," Hayes replied. "This is recognition. You've been doing the job for months without pay. We'd just like to make it official." 6 months later, Michael Torres traded his bench for an office, his cardboard sign for a nameplate that read, "Security Director." But every morning at 7:30, he'd walk past his old bench, just checking, just making sure. The city of Springfield never forgot that Tuesday in November. The bench where Michael used to sit now has a small plaque that reads, "Heroes aren't always in uniform. Sometimes they're in plain sight." But the real memorial wasn't the plaque. It was in the way people looked at each other differently, how they noticed the quiet ones, the ones who seemed invisible but were actually watching over everyone else. Michael Torres had taught his community something valuable. Heroism doesn't retire. It just changes uniforms. Sometimes it doesn't wear a uniform at all. So now I ask you, have you ever walked past someone who looked ordinary but might have been extraordinary? Have you ever wondered about the stories carried by the quiet ones, the ones society overlooks? Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us about the hidden heroes in your community. Because here at Story with Jorge, we believe every hero deserves to be seen. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, subscribe and share it. Help us keep telling the stories that matter, the ones that remind us to look a little closer, to notice a little more. And remember, the person you walk past tomorrow might be the hero you need today.